Hi, I'm Stephanie Lemick, and this is Building Trauma-Informed Workplaces. I am super excited to have two guests joining us today on the podcast to tell us a little bit more about what they're working on. And I am super excited to share it because I think it's pretty darn important. And both of these ladies are fantastic. So I will kick it over to them to introduce themselves, and we'll go from there. Jessica, if you want to go first, since I see you first, that would be fantastic.
That sounds great. Stephanie, thank you so much for having Belma and I here. It's an honor to be in a space having this kind of really important and powerful conversation. So my name is Jessica Belsky. Publicly, you may see me online as Jessica, guys. There's a long story around that. But anyway, so I'm a transformational coach and a hypnotherapist. And I also have a background in change management, learning and development, employee engagement. It's been many, many years of work experience. I've traveled the world of corporate America. I've worked with big Fortune 100 companies. I also have worked with literally thousands of people at this point in my career. My clientele have ranged from, executives at Fortune 50s and 100s to entrepreneurs, veterinarians, and heart surgeons, as well as stay-at-home moms who are just high-performing folks who are also spiritually and emotionally and personally curious about their own growth and development. I am trauma trained as part of some of the work that I've done over the last several years, my own professional development as well. And what else can I say? Yeah, I'm a co-founder of this awesome company, which we're going to talk about in a minute, with my wonderful, beautiful business partner here, Belma, called Proactive Conversations. So I'm going to pause there and turn it over to Belma.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jess. Hi, Stephanie. I'm so happy to be here with you both today. Yes, I'm the co-founder of Proactive Conversations with Jess. It's my second business and really excited to talk about it today. I'm also the founder of Work Bigger. I'm an executive coach. So through Work Bigger, historically, what I've done is support both organizations and individuals with reaching their full potentials and supporting companies with creating happy, healthier employees. So I focus a lot on leadership development, well-being, career pathing, and I'm also a trauma-informed coach, which Jess and I have integrated into Proactive Conversations. Prior to building my own businesses, I spent about 10 years in corporate America working at companies like the Associated Press, Condé Nast, Group M, so super familiar with the corporate space and how to navigate those. And really excited to be here and to dig deeper with our conversation today.
Oh, I'm so excited. This is amazing. And it is always great to connect with people who have kind of a similar priority, similar mission in this world. And so one of the things I know we wanted to make sure and spend a good deal of time talking about today is your organization, Proactive Conversations. So I would love for you to share with us what that's all about.
Sure. Yeah. Proactive Conversations is, at a high level, a 5-step methodology that teaches teams and organizations how to foster deeper connection, improved relationships, and more psychological safety in the workplace. Essentially, we teach people how to connect instead of control. Typically, a lot of communication methodologies that we see out there are reactive, meaning that they are focused on conflict resolution. Jess and I became exposed to this new methodology, which we can explore more, called nonviolent communication, through our training as coaches and facilitators. And we just started to see that there's a way to communicate in a way that just builds relationships. We don't really see that in the workplace. Jess and I both have that corporate background and had that experience ourselves. And so that's what we're doing at a high level. And we teach this 5-step methodology, and what we do on a deeper level is help people shift perspective around what it means to communicate effectively. So we can talk more about that as well.
Amazing. I love that concept of nonviolent communication. And if you are open to sharing, tell us more what that means. and how someone can think about that and why that might be important at work.
Yeah. Do you want me to take this one, Belma? I can jump in. So nonviolent communication was created by a brilliant man named Marshall Rosenberg, and it's been around for a really long time. And the idea is that it teaches people how to connect instead of control. It's less about being right and more about creating mutual understanding by breaking down walls and barriers and allowing people to be vulnerable about their feelings and their needs. And then from there to create mutual understanding and then take action. It's been used traditionally. It was used in every context you can think of, from helping people in a marriage to literally in the midst of like war zones. And so it's been proven to be effective for a really long time. And what Belma and I did was we saw the power of that, but also that it needed some updating in the way that it was taught and approached to be more of a fit in our modern world, and particularly in the organizational context. So what it really is about is helping to foster this human connection and using communication as a tool to really break down barriers and walls between people, to allow our heart and our compassion and our inner experiences to be visible. And, as you know, in the workplace, it's not as though we leave our trauma at the door. For many people, trauma is unresolved. For some people, they're aware of it and they're working on healing it, but it does show up in the way that we interact and relate at work. And so we believe that it's important to create cultures and to empower people with the skills and abilities to know how to communicate in effective ways around their feelings, their needs, so that and to state facts and not assumptions. And we'll talk more about that if we get into our methodology more. But essentially, all of this in a way to build deeper connections, more trusting, more safe spaces for people to be with one another.
Yeah, I love it. I'm like, I've been exposed to NVC for so many years now, and I still am like such a lean in when I talk about it, when I hear about it. Yeah, for me, when I was exposed to NVC, at first I remember, and this was through our training, Jess and I went through similar trainings. At first it like felt kind of clunky. And then as I sat with it more, I started to really lean into the deeper principles. One of the principles is self-responsibility. Another one is neutrality. And yeah, Jess and I talk about this. It's not just about like the steps of like how to communicate in this way, but it's also a way to like be in the world. And I think at the core, that was like one of the biggest pulls for me, is that I saw it as an opportunity. I was thinking, if I learn this methodology, and I remember saying this, I could spend the rest of my life putting this methodology into practice. And it's because of these underlying principles that I think when you embody them, allow you to truly show up as your best self, right? And of course, we can't do that all the time and be perfect in that all the time, right? But I just find it's so beautiful to strive for that. So yeah, I think there's like something so deep about this methodology that I think is like truly like heart opening. And I really do aspire to live to it every day to the best of my ability.
I really just want to jump on there. I do think that that's the important distinction. And one of the things that, when you really get this, not with your head, but with your heart, it really changes the way that you see yourself and the world around you. And that's the thing. It's so much more than a communications methodology. That's the way that we present it. But in reality, it is a different way of seeing yourself and interacting with the world as a result. And it's like, once you really get that and embody that and take that on and take that in, you can start to live differently. And that's why Belma and I are so passionate about this. We just think that if everybody understood these principles and this process, then it could truly change the world. And not to sound cliche, but it really, really can. And doing that in the organizational context where people spend 80% of their life is an important place to integrate this and to introduce this. So and it transcends the workplace, and we can talk more about that, but it goes beyond, because it is not just a way of communicating and resolving conflict. It is a way of being.
Starting an organization, building out a methodology, it's a lot of work. So I would love to hear from each of you, what inspired you to do this, kind of what's the kind of creation story of proactive conversations?
It's interesting. I was actually looking back at our some Instagram posts the other day, and I found a post from December 2022 that Jess had posted, and she was sharing all about how she loves communication and is teaching it to leaders. Now, Jess and I have a history. I hired Jess to support me with building Work Bigger a few years ago. We've known each other since 2016. I think we've been working together since 2018. And she was my coach, my mentor, someone I looked up to for many years. And then I see this post in December 2022, and I'm like, oh my God, Jess, I remember leaving you this message on WhatsApp. It was super random, and saying hey, I saw your post. I just want to tell you, I'm feeling more and more pulled to bring NVC to leaders and to teach people too. And I felt like that's, your post was the same thing. I just wanted to share how excited I was to see you do that. And then Jess replied, do you want to get on a call? Maybe we can explore what that can look like. And for me to have my mentor of many years be open to a collaboration like that was so exciting. And we got on a call, and fast forward to 2024, and we're launching a business together. So yeah, it's like a dream for me, and so amazing to work with Jess in this way. Yeah.
I feel the same. And also another important note there is that I had done this training with this organization called CORE, and brought Belma to do one of the the first workshops in a series of trainings. And I went through the leadership development training, and then she did the workshop, and she went through the leadership development training. And then we both ended up doing the advanced training together. So it was this really cool experience of her and I going from coach and mentor kind of relationship to becoming friends and being on the path and acquiring the same skills. And that, I think, also helped us really step into this at the same time. We were just at the same place at the same time, which is really special. So yeah, we've been on a path together for a long time, and we have a lot of shared passion around this work.
I love the origin stories so much. They're always so meaningful. So let's kind of dig into the meaty part, and I would love to understand more about the methodology. As much as kind of you're open and willing to share, that would make sense so folks can get a better understanding.
The methodology is 5 steps. It starts with active listening, right? So being present in the conversation. I know, Stephanie, I feel like you and I hit on active listening on another conversation that we had, right? And it's not just,
we did.
Right?
Yeah.
We did, yeah. Right. It's really about being present when you're engaging with someone, listening, truly listening, and how often are we truly listened to? I think so many miscommunications, misunderstandings happen because when someone else is talking, we're preparing a response. So to me, that's always an indicator to really pause, right? So active listening is the first step. Then from there, the facts, right? So identifying what happened, let's say in the situation with, that maybe brought up something for you, and being factual versus assumptive, right? So often we make judgments, we think in judgments and in assumptions. It's something that we do because of how the brain works, but really we want to create more neutrality. So we want to state the facts. Then step 3 is label the feeling, right? Identify the emotion that's present for you. This is really challenging for people because we're not open to always talking about our feelings. Feelings can make a lot of people uncomfortable, especially in the workplace. But this part is so important because it invites an opportunity to be real about what you're holding. It invites vulnerability and honesty, right? And then from there, stating the need, being clear about what it is that you need from the other person or in the conversation. And then the final step is making a request, right? Requesting something of the other person in a way that's specific. They know exactly what you're wanting from them and being really clear about that. We're not always clear in our language, right? I often see people like being indirect when they make requests, right? Or like beating around the bush. And this is, it's being direct, I think, can be very kind because it creates clarity for people.
There's obviously a lot of meat in each of those. I think that, the thing that's important about the methodology is that you can apply all 5 of them in a single conversation, or you could potentially only activate one depending on what's required or what might be necessary in a moment or a situation. So, for example, you may have a conversation and go through all 5 steps sequentially, or you may be able to just make a request. Or simply share a feeling, and that's enough. I'll give an example. Just today, we had a conversation with somebody that we may be doing business with, and I had a feeling come up. And instead of going through, instead of actively listening and then reporting back what I heard and then sharing the feeling and then the need and then making a request, I just simply shared the feeling that I was having in the moment, just expressing the feeling in the moment. And that way it creates a mutual understanding, right? It's about removing that veil like we talked about. So just a little note there that it can be used sequentially, or you can really use individual steps as a moment or a circumstance is arising.
Active listening. I love that came up again. Active listening is, it's important. It's also kind of one of those terms that gets thrown around a lot. Communication, how we create the right level of communication, conversations. Those are things we talk about a lot when it comes to the workplace. And we talk about, strong, positive organizations. What is it about this methodology? What is it about proactive conversations that's different? And you all really think this is something that could be a game changer for leaders, for teams, for organizations?
I think that what makes this different is that not only do we provide a skill and do the hard skill training in this methodology, and do you get like a step-by-step process, but it truly does change the way that you perceive communication in your life. It's about changing a belief system in the end. And that shift in belief system is what creates the bigger ripple effect, because it ultimately means that we begin to relate, like I said before, to ourselves and other people differently. Also, a lot of communication training is based on sharing information or persuading or resolving conflict. And this is about healing, connecting, in addition to potentially resolving conflict. But the goal is to share and to communicate in a way that stops conflict from happening or escalating at all. So this is more about seeing communication as a tool for connection in addition to getting things done. So much of communication is just like, okay, how do we make sure that I'm just more effective and getting things done, being more this focus on productivity? What we believe is that when you communicate in this way, that productivity is the natural byproduct of the conversation, because people now feel safer, they feel more included, there's a deeper sense of trust. And when those qualities exist in a relationship, a team, or in a culture, it's easier for people to produce because they have the ability to operate as their whole self at work. And when we bring our whole selves to work, more can get done because you're bringing online all of the capacities that somebody has instead of only the parts that feel safe to show up at work, right? Yeah. So that, I think, is one of the biggest, or some of the biggest differences. I'm sure maybe Belma has something to add.
Yeah, I really want to highlight the connection piece. When I think about employee engagement and retention, right, and all the efforts that organizations make to engage and retain their talent, like you hear so often, people don't leave companies, they leave their managers, right, or they leave the culture. Well, I think something people are really craving in the workplace is more connection. Connection is really good for us. It facilitates well-being, right? It increases our engagement. So this is directly tied to that. And yeah, it just goes so much deeper than teaching this hard skill. Like you're really getting to people's hearts. And that's what people want. People want to feel safe in the workplace. They want to be seen. They want to be heard, right? And this facilitates that. It's not just about like resolving an issue. It's much, much deeper.
I love that. I have like many questions now as follow-ups.
Yeah,
So I'm gonna be like, I'm gonna pretend I'm Bob. I don't know why I've made up a character Bob. This is probably deeply unnecessary. But I have, Bob is always in my head. Whenever there's, an HR, a soft skill type, a warm, fuzzy initiative, Bob pops up and goes, here's why I don't think this will work, without very much information. So Bob popped up in my head and he said, but isn't conflict good? Isn't conflict going to help us do better at work?
Yeah.
And so how does that tie into
let's draw a distinction. This is an important distinction. And we actually talk about this in our master classes that we teach and in our workshop. There's a distinction between healthy and unhealthy conflict. So healthy conflict is progressive. It moves people, situations forward. Unhealthy conflict is deconstructive, right? It takes things down. It destructs things, right? Like it's not progressive, it's regressive. It puts us into this is me getting into psychology language, but like our unhealthy selves, our survivor parts, like the parts of us that want to call them protector parts. It means that people oftentimes withhold information. They start to stonewall one another. There's shutting down. There's blaming and judging and shaming. And those are destructive, not constructive. So healthy conflict is when two people can come together and have a disagreement about something and then find a resolution that's positive and moves forward. So this is the distinction here. And that's one of the things that our methodology really supports is how do we have that disagreement and how do we do that from both our head and our heart, right? Because there's the logical mind that may disagree sometimes. And then sometimes it's our emotional body that disagrees. And both of those have validity and need space for expression. So it's about empowering people with the tools and a process, a validated process to do that. So that's how I would answer Bob. Yeah, Bob, like I agree. There is a need for conflict that's healthy and productive, not destructive.
I love that. Bob's happy also. Bob's like, yes, I get it. Apparently he just got a name today, the little naysayer in my head.
The skeptic.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
One other thing I loved, from both of your description, it brought to mind two things that I think we've been talking about a lot lately and a lot in the context of work. Number one is psychological safety. Mm-hmm. To me, proactive conversations, this methodology is a wonderful, deliberate action that can be taken to help build psychological safety. I think what's tricky sometimes is you say build psychological safety, or we point out, the power of psychological safety on a team. And a lot of times, especially maybe leaders who haven't been able to build it on their team yet, or are coming into a new team that is lacking in psychological safety, it's like, well, what can I do? What are the concrete actions I can take? And to me, this is one of those things like, hey, this is a tool, a resource that you can learn, that you can use as a leader and on your team to actually help build psychological safety. And the other piece of it is we talk so much about loneliness and we talk so much about connection at work. And again, it is another one, much like psychological safety. It's one of those things where it's like, what checklist of things can we run down? Can we build ERGs? Can we have team happy hours, which is a whole nother conversation we could have. But again, this gets to as part of something that is central to how we do work, which is communication. We're building out a skill set that drives connection and psychological safety and helps us move through communication in a more productive way. So it's just like, to me, it's like it ticks off these things that are so important that are often really nebulous and hard for someone who's actually practicing in organization as a leader, as an HR professional. It's really hard to sometimes translate these great concepts into actions. It sounds like you both have been able to do that. So it's just so exciting. Love that.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie, for sharing that. Yeah, when I think about psychological safety, my mind goes to why do people not feel safe in the workplace, right? What is in the environment? What is in the leadership that's making them feel unsafe, right? And usually it's the modeling isn't quite right? Or there's a lack of vulnerability in those spaces that makes people feel like they have to hide, right? And that they can't be themselves fully. So I think the psychological safety piece is so important because we all want that, right? Whether you're the CEO or you're an individual contributor, like you want to go to work feeling good, feeling safe, feeling healthy. Like that's, I think, like a universal need.
Absolutely. And if you're not safe, I talk about this all the time when we talk about trauma-informed workplaces. If you're not safe, and that's all aspects of safety, physical safety, psychological safety, financial safety. If you're not safe, you are not that best version of yourself. It's not possible. And that's not a dig at anyone. It is just your body, your brain is automatically looking for ways to make you more safe and to protect you. And the better we get at understanding this, the better we get at being thoughtful about this within organizations. I think the better organizations perform and the better they feel as well.
I think that COVID really shifted things and helped to blur the line between the personal and the professional world. And everybody was kind of experiencing at the same time a lot of fear.
Yeah.
And the workplaces ended up having to evolve to acknowledge the role that fear and a lack of safety plays. And they saw firsthand how that impacts the organization and the bottom line, and what it looks like when employees are overwhelmed or stressed out in this way, especially. So I think that safety is such an important conversation to have. And I do agree with you that a lot of these concepts are nebulous. They're like airy fairy, if is another word you might use. Like, it's like, okay, like I kind of get the theory of that, but like, what does that mean? You know, the three of us here, this is our life, right? We dig this stuff. We geek out on this stuff. But for most people like Bob, Bob doesn't understand how to apply psychological safety practically. Like, what do I do then, other than being like giving loving praise to somebody, like, good job, these. So it's I think something like this. And I hope that there are more things like this that are continued to be created by other wonderful people like you, that can take these bigger concepts and make them real in the world so that they can become practical and actionable inside companies. I think that's really, really important, and Belma and I really work hard in our trainings to make sure that the way that we present the content and the material is very succinct, very dialed in, because each one of these concepts could be months worth and years, honestly, worth of exploration on their own, right? I mean, just learning how to state the observable facts and not jump into judgments, evaluations, and assumptions is life's work. So, how do we take these really big things and distill them down into bite-sized chunks and that are easy to digest, and then act on? I think that's an important step for us as stewards of this work right now, to go from that academic esoteric conversation to like the real world conversation and the real world application.
I love that so much, because that's one of the things, and I've shared this many times at this point. One of the reasons I do the work I do is it's not because work around trauma informed just about everything doesn't exist. It's not accessible.
Yeah.
And I think, I spent 16 years in corporate environments supporting frontline employees, managers. things keep getting piled, especially on managers' plates. And it becomes like, how do I do this? What can I do? And the more we can do to actually take things and make them work for managers so they can go, oh, I can pick this up and do this and actually make it work and make a difference. And even if it's, not the whole big, huge elephant, it's just maybe a little piece, that still makes a huge difference to everyone. So that's why I get so excited about the work you're doing, because you are very engaged in, yes, there's this deep, nerdiness we all have wanting to dig into the details, but at the same time, there's this desire to make it really practical and applicable for folks who already have a lot on their plates.
Agreed. There's no point. I don't know. I've learned, like, I can get into that academic esoteric place, and I get a lot of glass over eyeballs,
Same.
And like I'm talking to my geeks, like my fellow geeky, psych nerds, and then we're just like, yes, tell me more, but everybody else is kind of like. So I think that I think that's part of our work, to be bridge walkers, right? And translators of these concepts so that they can be accessible. I love that word. I think that's a really important word.
I've kind of, maybe it's Bob, maybe it's Stephanie. Bob and Stephanie teamed up over lunch and came up with a really interesting question for you. Perhaps it's the time of year, but there is a very contentious election cycle going on right now. And this is something that frequently comes up in just about every space there is, but it's a really tricky one when it comes to navigating at work. How do we deal with different viewpoints, different voting behaviors, all of these differences in a world that's gotten really polarized, especially outside of the workplace? How can you guys see, this methodology, the work you're doing help with that scenario?
I know for me, like, I started feeling the polarization, back in 2020, probably even earlier. Much earlier, obviously, right? 2016. And for me personally, it feels really hard to hold that. The polarization, I can see the impact that can have. For context, I was born in Albania. I'm a refugee. Albania was a communist country that was, my family was heavily persecuted by the government. Communism ended. We eventually moved here. So I have some experience with being in a really difficult political situation. So for me, the polarization is really challenging, and I don't have all the answers, right? But I know what I try to do is I try to be true to some of these principles and try to navigate differences of opinion by holding things like self-responsibility and neutrality and practicing active listening, even if when my desire is to lash out, right, and be angry, because I have that, right? It's really difficult, especially when the stakes are so high. And I think with this election, the stakes are very high. It's not easy to do, but I did say, right, that I'm committed to doing my best to living this work for throughout my life. And I think it especially applies in this election. And I'm spending a lot of time listening as someone who teaches communication. I'm really trying to listen, because I would love to know, like, where that breakdown is happening on a deeper level. And I have that trauma-informed lens, right? So, and a good understanding of the human condition. So when I think about what's going on, I really try to assess it from that perspective. I don't know if that answers your question. I know that might sound very vague, but it's like, I think how I'm personally navigating the polarity that we feel.
I think it's fantastic. It's a hard question. I told you, Bob and I had to go brainstorm this one. So
I love that. I think, Belma, that was so beautiful. I think that sometimes polarity is a reflection of our own inner, like there's so much of our own inner world experience that gets projected into these kinds of conversations. And one of the core principles that we kind of really teach is this idea of connection over control and being right. And it's about this creation of mutual understanding. And that requires humility in a large part, the willingness to listen to somebody else without being right, the willingness to hear another perspective, to be curious instead of judgmental. So I really do think that when it comes to a methodology like this, the principles, like Belma said, are where the rubber meets the road in terms of that massive perspective and belief shift, and why we say this isn't just about teaching a communications methodology, it's about changing the way that you relate to yourself and the world around you. Imagine what it would be like if we were all to be curious, non-judgmental, and take total self-responsibility in these discussions. Just those three principles alone. Neutrality, there's so many more. But what would that be like? How might we be able to have healthy conflict in these spaces? To say, I can hear you. I may not agree, I may not like, but I hear you. Mm-hmm. And it's that empathy that I think sometimes is overlooked. Yeah, this is about, like I said before, bridging that space between the head and the heart. And oftentimes, I think that not just with political conversations, but any kind of discussion that where there could be polarity, the gender conversation is one as well. Like there's a lot of big discussions that are now influencing the workplace that can create a lot of polarity. Anytime there's that, I think leaning into these principles as ways of being in the world and walking in integrity with them has the power to allow us to be in duality, you know, like to be comfortable in that duality is important.
Yeah. Yeah. And it makes me think, like, what then is possible that we haven't considered, you know, truly, like what's possible for us? Because there's also, it's like, I think the assumptions thing is really powerful. The assumptions we make about, people who have different beliefs.
Yeah.
And then what is the impact of that, right? When we make assumptions, what happens is that our brain shuts down. Yep. Like we've already made up our mind, so we're not listening, right? And that applies to so many different situations. You can even bring it down to a very specific, like a situation at home. You're arguing with your partner. You've made an assumption about how he or she or they feel about you, right? And then your brain shuts down and is no longer open to receiving information, right? So, and I don't know if we're really listening when that I mean, we're not listening when that happens.
Wonderful. Yeah. Like what wonderful insights. What great answers to like my was like, let me kick you like the most random hard question ever.
It is a hard one for sure. I mean, I think, the political situation brings so much for everyone, you know?
Yeah, it does. It's definitely spicy.
It's spicy. I think sometimes too, and this might be a whole separate conversation. I think sometimes when we start to tie our identity to certain things, it makes it much harder to listen, to be non-judgmental, to not build up that wall. And I think a lot of identity gets rolled into political conversation. So it just creates more and more of those challenges as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Really.
So I want to make sure, you've shared so much about the amazing work you're doing. I'm certain our listeners are like, how can I start to learn more, do more with proactive conversation? So I would love if you are able to share, where folks can find you, what type of training or services you are offering now or will be offering in the future?
First of all, you can find us at proactiveconversations.com. That's our website. And on the website, you are welcome to peruse a little bit more to learn about the methodology, to learn about our offerings, which I'll share in a second. And you can reach out to us to schedule a call. But we have several different training programs. We have master classes that we offer to organizations. It's just like I heard this thing when I did employee comms work and engagement works, bite snack meal. Yeah. So like the master class is like a bite. It gives you a taste of what this is, what this work can be, and it's a great way to introduce these concepts to an organization. Then we have the snack, which is if somebody wants to do one module of content that's a 2-hour workshop, they can kind of really sink their teeth in a little bit deeper and feel what it's like to get a little bit more full on the methodology. And then there's like the whole meal, right, which is the full 2-day training, which is 2 half days of training where we go through the entire methodology. And we also offer a 4-week integration program for coaching to ensure that the methodology sticks. And there's more information about all of those things on our website. And we're happy to set up a call with anyone. What we really love to do is if somebody's feeling resonant with this concept and it's like, our company needs this and we want to learn more, we just talk about the challenges that they're facing in communication inside the company and explore which of our services could be the best fit for them. So that's how you could work with us. And we also have, I think we have our LinkedIn is going live now. We have an Instagram handle. You can follow us at Proactive Conversations. Different ways to keep in touch. And we have a newsletter, sign up on our website. And there's also a free masterclass you can watch on our website too. You can sign up to learn more. We have some great free content there as well.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, you answered my next question. If someone wants to just go ahead and learn more, then they could from this podcast conversation. It sounds like head to the website as well. And there's some free resources already available, which is amazing. Yes. Thank you both so much. This has been such a phenomenal conversation. I am so thrilled. Number one, I'm going to go watch the masterclass. I am so thrilled to learn more about this methodology. I'm so excited for the work you're doing. And thank you so much for joining us and sharing more and all the work you're doing. Everyone, thank you so much for listening in. Until next time, be well.